The following is a presentation from the Greece Historical Society. The second Tuesdays of the month programs from the Greece Historical Society are sponsored by members of the Greece Historical Society and by the sponsors of advertisements in the newsletter. Space for today's program is sponsored by the Greece Central School District's Transportation and Support Services Facility.
ROC 2024 Solar Eclipse, Preparing for Totality, presented by Dan Schneiderman, Eclipse Partnership Coordinator at the Rochester Museum Science Center.
Recorded March 12th, 2024.
You can. So without further ado, I want to introduce Bill Sowers.
Thank you. And you all know we do have a museum too on Long Pond Road, and we're open on Sunday afternoons now. We are closed Easter. So Dan Schneiderman is the Eclipse Partnership Coordinator at the Rochester Museum Science Center and co-chair of the Rochester Eclipse Task Force. He has over 10 years of experience producing STEM-based events and coordinating sectors at festivals, including the Maker Faire Rochester, the New York State Fair, and the first robotics competition. He currently sits on the subcommittee for the AAS National Eclipse Committee and advises community groups around the country how to prepare for the upcoming eclipse, which is what you're doing tonight. Currently is working towards making sure that literally everyone under the sun has a chance to experience the 2024 total eclipse. So please welcome Dan.
So good evening, everyone. I have to say, if today's weather is what it's like on April 8th, we are going to be in great shape. I have to say this, winter, honestly, has gotten me really excited. But first, we have to get into a bit of things first. So thank you all for having me. I am the Eclipse Partnership Coordinator at the RMSC. We'll see what happens after that. I start every presentation with this one question. How many people here have seen a total solar eclipse? There's always a few. I now have to ask how many people here have seen a partial solar eclipse? A lot more. I am in that partial solar eclipse group. I have yet to see a total solar eclipse. So I'm a bit jealous of all those who did raise their hands initially, but I'll get to join you in that 26 days. From the stories that I've heard, the videos and I've seen online, the books I've read, it is an experience we're all not going to want to miss. So let's dive in. We are just under 4 weeks. This past Monday was 4 weeks away from the eclipse. It is scary how fast it has come up. To give you an idea about how long we have been talking about the eclipse, I have been in my position since 2021. I started as a volunteer at one of our stakeholder meetings in 2019, and if you were to ask our previous planetarium director, Steve Fentress, he was promoting it back in 2012. We've been working at this little by little and then really ramping up just to make sure that we could be ready. So here is the very basic science. When the geometry allows, moon in front of sun, cast giant shadow, we are in that shadow. Thank you very much. That's basically what it comes down to. But to kind of give you a better idea, this is what the view will be on April 8th, 2024 at 3:20 p.m. It will almost be like a velvet hole in the middle of the sky. That little bit of light that you see around the sun, that is the sun's outer atmosphere, the corona. Up until very recently, and by recent I mean last couple decades, we weren't able to see the outer atmosphere of the sun except during a total solar eclipse. It is a fantastic sight to see. There are a couple different types of solar eclipses out there. So there's a partial solar eclipse, which we had here in Rochester in 2017, and in 2021, when the moon blocks out a chunk of the sun's disk. Technically, we're still getting a partial eclipse on April 8th, just every time that's not totality. Then we have an annular eclipse, which is when the moon's orbit, there are times when it's slightly closer to us and slightly further away from us. When the moon is slightly further away from us, well, from our point of view here on Earth, it looks ever so slightly smaller, which means that it doesn't completely cover up the sun. And we get this ring around the moon. This is what's often called the Ring of Fire. We had one of these this past October. And if you remember, we had one here in Rochester in 1994. And then there's the main show that we're all getting ready for, the total solar eclipse, that when the moon is slightly closer to us, when it passes in front of it, it completely covers the sun's disk. Now, we're able to have solar eclipses due to some very, very lucky geometry. So while the sun is 400 times larger than the moon is 400 times closer to us. So from our vantage point here on Earth, they're about the exact same size. And to give you an idea of what this would look like is, if you were to have a 10-foot sun or a 10-foot orange tablecloth, the Earth would only be about an inch and the moon would only be a quarter of an inch. So basically a bouncy ball and a little less than a marble. You can somewhat see the Earth in this picture. You cannot see the moon. The Earth to the moon would be about 3 feet, and then the sun to the Earth would be 1,074 feet, or about the distance, a little less than the distance than East Ave to Park Ave. And the reason why I can say that is, A, we did the math, and B, we're like, oh, this works out perfectly. Let's recreate this. And so, in that park behind the planetarium and behind the museum, we set up our 10-foot sun. We then walked all the way to the front of the planetarium because there's a slight path that we can pull this off, and we were able to block it out with that quarter-inch moon. It's kind of wild. There's another way I want you to think about this. I want all of you to stick out your thumb and block out my head. Well, thank you very much for saying I'm doing a good job. But were you able to completely block out my head? Some yes, some no. If you are, well, good news. You have basically just recreated a total solar eclipse. While your thumb is not bigger than my head, it is probably a lot closer to you. And so from your perspective, it looks to be about the exact same size. That's all that's really happening during a total solar eclipse. So why don't we see them more often? Technically, there are eclipses somewhere on Earth about every 6 to 8 months. Total solar eclipses happen every 18 to 24. For any given location to experience a total solar eclipse, the average is around 375 to 400 years. There are outliers. In Carbondale, Illinois, it's about 5 hours south of Chicago. They were in the path in 2017, and they are again in 2024. Very, very lucky people. Rochester, our average is between 100 and 120. Cosmically, we're very lucky. From the human point of view, not so much. To give you an idea why we don't see them every month, here's a video by our new planetarium director, Jim Bader.
We get a solar eclipse when the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, and its shadow crosses over the surface of the Earth. But if it takes a little less than a month for the moon to go around the Earth, have you ever wondered, why don't we get a solar eclipse once a month? Most times if the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, the shadow left by the moon either goes completely above or below the Earth. When geometry allows, the shadow will pass directly over the Earth. And, if we are very lucky, the shadow might pass directly over where we are on the Earth, like it will on April 8th, 2024 here in Rochester, New York.
So let's skip ahead to what you'll actually see that day. The main thing is, well, you'll see the moon blocking out the sun. That's what we're all getting really excited about. It's going to get dark, but not as dark as you would think. Honestly, right now it's not too far off from how dark it is. It's like a deep dusk. Deep dusk, a twilight. It's this gorgeous, gorgeous dark blue. If you were to look on the horizon, you'll notice a 360-degree sunset. You might notice a couple planets in the sky. If you were to look a little bit further higher up on the horizon, you'll see Jupiter. A little bit lower down, you'll see Venus. If you were at a high enough vantage point with nothing on the horizon and in a much lower light pollution area, you might even be able to see Saturn and Mars. The brightest of stars will be visible. There's one constellation I encourage everyone to look for during totality, and that's Orion. That constellation that we tend to see a lot this time of year, especially those 3 dots that make up Orion's belt. And then we have the diamond ring effect and Baily's beads. Now, the moon is not a perfectly smooth surface. There's craters, there's valleys, and in the last couple of seconds before totality, as it moves in front of the sun, light will escape through those valleys. And it almost looks like beads of light dancing on the edge of the moon. You can see it at the last couple seconds right after totality ends as well. The diamond ring effect is that initial burst of light as we enter totality. It is this gorgeous, gorgeous view, and it basically is almost your starting bell to the eclipse, to totality. This is usually what you think of when you think of a total solar eclipse. Now, to give you an idea of what this is actually going to look like, this is about 2.5 hours compressed into a couple of seconds. It moves not horizontally across as it does in a lot of graphics, but actually down, slowly covering it up, and then continuing to move onwards. Almost more vertical, but with a slight curve. And so it'll almost look like we get a bigger and bigger bite out of the sun. Now, it doesn't become dark until the last couple moments, or at least that's when you really start to notice it. The eclipse will start at about 2:07 p.m., and I'll get into the exact times for Greece in a second. But you really won't notice it until maybe 5 minutes beforehand, at best. It will really start to get dark in the last couple of seconds leading into a totality. And that's when you'll really notice it going from day to night. If you are looking for photos online, well, you'll notice a lot of them are with a filter. Now this is for the same reason that all of you have eclipse glasses, and that's to protect your eyes. Cameras need filters too. And so here's a view wherein during totality you can actually remove the filter. To give you another idea of what this will look like, this is footage, I'm actually going to mute this, from Tennessee with our previous planetarium director, Steve Fentress. I'm actually going to fast forward a little bit. As you can see, it really starts to get dark out. One thing that's in the longer version of this video is one thing I hope none of you are doing, which is you can see a car driving by with its lights on. I don't recommend to be driving during this. So you can see it's getting really dark. I love this view that he took because, yes, you can take video of the eclipse, yet again with a filter, but he focused on the people in that horizon view. To skip ahead a little bit, we're exiting totality here. So you will see in a moment it get bright very, very quickly. As we exit totality, it is almost like an ice pick of light. You will want to have those eclipse glasses back on your face before the end of totality because look at how fast it's suddenly getting bright out. This is playing in real time. It really is a difference between night and day. I'm just going to hit slideshow from. So the eclipse is not just a visual experience, but a physical one as well. During totality, on average, the temperature drops by about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Animals and plants will act as if it was nighttime. Birds back to their nest, cows back to the barn. If you have cats and dogs, do not worry, they just do not care. Dogs are just excited to be with you. Your cat maybe loses a sunspot. That's about it. In the 20 minutes before and after totality, I want you to look at the ground at your own shadow as it becomes incredibly sharp. You might even notice shadow bands, which is just these refractions from Earth's atmosphere's turbulence. They're really wild to see. It can be a little tricky to find them though. But the main thing you'll notice is how eerily still it becomes. You can understand why some civilizations and some mythology was, oh, the world is ending. The hair on the back of your neck might stand up. There's almost a fight or flight response that hits you for some folks. Yes, you'll probably hear an initial cheer at the start of totality. But after that, oh, some people, I've heard people start crying, start laughing. I even have heard people say that everything around them just melts, except for the sun, the moon, the earth, and themselves. It is a wild experience that hits you. You really are overcome with the sense of awe and wonder. I have to say, for the people who experience totality, does that sound about right?
Yes, it does.
There we are. If you want to plan ahead for your viewing experience, I want you to think basically now by looking south-southwest about 45 degrees up, halfway up the horizon. When it comes to eclipse day, admittedly, all you have to do is have your eclipse glasses on and look towards the sun. A little bit easier. I started giving this slide over a year ago, telling people to plan ahead. At this point, I can just say, just put your glasses on. You'll find it. As I mentioned earlier, Jupiter will be a little bit higher up and Venus a little bit lower down. So, this question. This is the number one question I get asked. Admittedly, the weather is helping me tackle this question right now. So what happens if it's cloudy? Here's the thing. No matter what, we have no control over the sun, the moon, the earth, or the weather. It's still going to happen. The eclipse is still going to come here, and it will still get dark. In fact, it will be noticeably darker out if it's cloudy. I want you to think about sunrise this morning and sunrise yesterday, when it was all clouded, when it was really, really clouded over. How much darker was it yesterday morning at sunrise compared to this morning? It just felt so much darker. Exact same thing happens with the eclipse. And, well, there's some things that are actually working in our favor. I want you to think about our position on Lake Ontario and our friends in Buffalo who have gotten 2, 3, 4, 5 feet of snow. How much snow have we gotten at during those times? Barely an inch half the time. We are in a very, very lucky spot on Lake Ontario where Rochester has its own microclimate. And it tends to hit there a little bit more and it tends to hit Syracuse a little bit more. And this has been mapped out over decades of weather data. Right here is Rochester. This is the average cloud amount in the sky for that day. Yes, our probability is at 60% according to this graph. Cleveland's only slightly better, but we're one of the best places on the East Coast. Sure, if you go to Texas, it gets about 10% better, and then even more so if you go into Mexico. But this graph doesn't take into account that we're in an El Nino year. So it tends to be a little bit warmer and a little bit drier. And I want to present Exhibit A outside today. And honestly, a good chunk of this past winter. It's been a very unusual winter. And it might help us on April 8th, or at least that's what I keep telling myself. I also want to point out previous years of weather data for April 8th. A single point of data does not make a pattern, but I really love this data point. This is April 8th, 2023. It was about 40 to 50 degrees outside and not a cloud in the sky. We would have had one of the best views of the eclipse on April 8th, 2023. It is insane that we got that view. But really, it's not insane. We have seen these lovely days in early April before. This is from the last decade, not every year, but not always on April 8th, but around April 8th, we have had sunny days. Yes, if you are to look at the last 50 years, weather's not necessarily in our favor. But I would combine the clear to mostly cloudy numbers together. And there's a reason why I say that. In the moments leading into totality, because the sun is getting blocked out, it becomes cooler and a lot of our clouds tend to dissipate. So at the last possible second, we might get things that happened like it happened at Homestead National Monument. So in 2017, they had 20,000 people there. And if you were to look in the background, you can see heavy rain. They actually had thunderstorms earlier that day. And I'm actually going to point this in the direction of the eclipse. This is a great 360 video. We now occasionally play this at the planetarium. It's a lot of fun. And now I'm going to fast forward about 2 minutes, getting into totality. At the last possible second, the clouds parted. That little dot right there, that's the view. Imagine getting soaked with 20,000 of your friends and honestly complete strangers. And the clouds parting in a cheer around. That could happen right here in Rochester. Let's take a step back and, take an eagle-eye view of the eclipse. So this is the path of the 2023 eclipse that took place in October. It hit the west coast and went into Texas. For the upcoming eclipse, it starts down in Mexico, moves its way into Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, eventually even hitting Ohio, and of course, New York. After us, it will pass into Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Canada. While the 2017 eclipse was known as the Great American Eclipse, this is the Great North American Eclipse. To kind of clean that map up a little, here is all of the major cities within the path of the eclipse. I like pointing out that Cleveland, Buffalo, and Rochester are all fairly centered, especially when compared to a lot of the cities further down south. I actually have some friends in San Antonio, Texas, who have to figure out logistics as it goes directly through the middle of their city. A little bit of fun there. And then New York. Anywhere in between these two blue lines will get to experience totality. The closer you are to that red line, the longer it will be. In fact, you're pretty good right here. The only slightly better view where you might get an extra second is at SUNY Brockport as it goes directly through their football field. They are very, very lucky, and oh, are they celebrating. There's a couple things I love pointing out on this map. First thing, what connects Cleveland, Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse? Thruway. I like the snow answer. I actually haven't had that one. I think that's a new one added to the list. If there's any place to not be on April 8, 2024, it's the Thruway. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. The other thing I like pointing out on this map is everyone you interacted with today. Everyone you drove by, everyone who you saw, your friends, your families, your neighbors, every student that goes to the district here, and all of their family and friends, and honestly just everyone in the 9-county region every single one of us will get to experience this eclipse. How often can you say that 1.1 million people in our region get to celebrate something all at once? And something positive? Sure, if, one of the last Bills games went better, I could say yes. But with that exception, there's about 3.75 to 4 million New York State residents, all who live in the path within New York State. About 30 million across the US. And even outside the path, everyone in the continental US will still get a view of the eclipse. That's 350 million people all looking up and getting to share in something positive. I also want to point out relatively where we are. I think I actually need to move that arrow up a little bit higher. But to give you an idea, here are the exact times for this address. I will say your address will, where you are standing will change it by maybe a second, but that's over a larger distance. So for right here in Greece, the eclipse will begin almost exactly at 2:07 p.m. Totality, that moment that you are all going to want to be outside for, starts at 3:20 in 6 seconds and will last until 3:23 and 48 seconds. In fact, totality overall will last 3 minutes and 42 seconds. A whole 4 seconds more than I will get at the RMSC. There are people who will go chasing every last second. I'm not included in that crowd. I'm good with my 4 last seconds. And then the whole thing ends at 4:33 and 23 seconds. It is not just a 3.5 minute experience. It's 2.5, and even it's 2.5 hours, and even then, it's much, much longer. I'll leave this slide up for a sec for anyone else taking photos. Now, I have been asked, if I was to drive on I-90 really, really fast, could I keep up with the shadow? I ended up looking into this, and this video, I think, illustrates it well. That shadow goes from 2,200 miles per hour to about 2,700 miles per hour and crosses New York State in a span of 11 minutes. I don't think you can keep up. There are some flights out there in the US if you want to keep up with the eclipse. The cheapest ticket I have seen out there is about $800 and you don't get the view. Don't recommend it. It's also important to note your location for the eclipse. If you are in the Finger Lakes, it's going to be very, very important because it's more than a minute difference depending on where you are standing. Yes, if you're in Lakeville and Canandaigua, you still get excellent long experiences. But the closer to that edge of the path of totality, the shorter it will become. I was in Penyan December 2022, gave a talk where we were in the path of totality. Where we went 5 minutes down the road for their holiday party, outside the path. It is a very much, please check it out if you know anyone down there and maybe invite them up. And we do know that people right outside, in Ithaca and Watkins Glen, are going to get a different view. But it won't be the same. 99.9% coverage is not totality. This is about 94-95%, and this is 99.39% of the sun being covered. With this, you must keep your eclipse glasses on. Only when the sun is completely blocked out during totality can you remove them when looking directly at the sun, which I heavily encourage all of you do, because it's really quite the sight. If you are looking for length, we have these links on the website. There's lots of great information out there. The very quick bit of history, the first eclipse kind of as modern Rochester would have taken place in 1806. The last time we had one was in 1925, which there's a lot of great articles from the Democratic Chronicle back then. My favorite bit is from January 24th, 1925, the day of that last eclipse. And in one paragraph it says, Rochesterians will have to get ready for 2024. Hearing people talk about us back 99 years ago is wild. I'm going to have to somehow make sure that the Democratic Chronicle says the next year, which I'll get to in a sec. The last total eclipse, a lot of you remember in 2017, but looking forward, yes, there's one in Alaska in 2033, there is one in the Dakotas and Montana in 2044, but the next major one in the US won't be till 2045. Next time for New York State, 2079, so 55 years, it hits more downstate then, but Rochester. We have a little bit of waiting. The next time we have one is in 120 years. My favorite way to think about this is if basically a baby is born on April 8th, or honestly any time now, their grandkid's kid, or more likely grandkid's grandkid, will get to experience that eclipse. It's a wild amount of time to think about. Now you'll probably hear this number on the news. Our region is expecting about 300 to 500,000 visitors if the weather is wonderful. The reasoning behind that number is that it's not just the city, it is not just Monroe County, it is the entire 9-county area, and includes people coming from right outside the path into it. So it's that southern part of the Finger Lakes, it's a little bit more east of us, and it's people traveling from much further away. And I say that because, well, we have been tracking where people have been registering for the RMSC festival all over the US. And this is updated as of 2 days ago. I honestly had to add in this next slide to basically show where on the East Coast that people are mostly coming from. I'm also not showing the world map where we are having people come in from Europe just to view the eclipse. Now, I'm often asked why this is important. You know, first of all, wearing my museum hat, I have to say, oh, yeah, it's the perfect time to get people interested in science, to get interested in space and astronomy. There's the tourism aspect, which is a ton of funding to promote the region, all of our museums, the restaurants. Admittedly, I've been lucky enough to promote the beer, wine, and cider and distilleries that are all making Eclipse items. There's the economic impact, but then there's also the cultural one. Almost every religion and culture throughout history has had some connection to a solar eclipse. There are prayers based off of solar eclipses out there. Different mythologies about animals eating the sun and then spitting it back out. It's all over pop culture, from everything in Mark Twain to Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, to Little Shop of Horrors. A lot of people know Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart, which I cannot look forward enough to not hearing that song for a while. I hear it almost on a daily basis, usually when being introduced on the news. And then there's that positive aspect that I mentioned. We've all gone through a lot of negative experiences where millions of people got to experience it, but how many positive ones have we gone through? And it really is different for everyone. Through this job, I have chatted with everyone and anyone imaginable, from manufacturers to restaurants, universities to preschools, hospitals, EMTs, fire departments, everyone. And it's kind of led to the phrase that everyone under the sun is a stakeholder. It really will impact everyone. I can even personally say my daughter's daycare has canceled care for that afternoon. I wasn't planning on having her there anyhow, but still. Speaking of impact, traffic. As you saw, we are expecting a lot of people from the New York, DC, and Philly, Boston crowd. Thankfully, the eclipse is on a Monday, so we're expecting people to trickle in. Easter's 8 days beforehand. So it could be over a couple days, even over a week. But the fun bit comes right after Totality. Back in 2017, about 15 minutes after Totality ended, people said, wow, I can't believe I got to experience this. This was an insane moment to live through. This was worth every second to travel for. Let's head home. Now multiply that by tens or hundreds of thousands of people. We saw some of the worst traffic issues in the US back then. I want to say, remember how I said Carbondale was about 5 hours south of Chicago? The way back became 12 hours. I want to say there was one outlier that was 20 hours. That was due to a one-way road, I want to say over a bridge, and there was a traffic incident that had everything back up. And here's what's fun about our location. If you go to the east or west, you run into Buffalo and Syracuse, who are both experiencing the eclipse. You can't really go north because, well, you run into a lake. I do know people who are going out on the lake that day. I'm sure there's going to be a fair amount of boats. So where does that leave people going? Every back road imaginable. As I said, you do not want to go over I-90. Especially anyone who's even thinking about going towards Canada, it's going to become rough, as it's right over Niagara Falls. And I mean, it is literally right over Horseshoe Falls. NASA's doing a whole big setup there. It's going to be wild. So we are saying, let's stay local, let's decentralize, and try and reduce traffic whenever possible. In fact, part of this is we work with the schools. April 8th is that Monday, and it's 3:20 is a popular time for schools to be getting out. You don't want kids stuck on buses because they'll be missing out for 21 years. I also can't imagine a bus driver pulling off to the side of the road, getting all the kids off the bus, looking up with the proper protection, getting them back on the bus, and then on their way. We thought about having them stay long, but then we're worried about them getting stuck in traffic, or their parents getting stuck in traffic. And so after about 1.5 to 2 years, we worked with a lot of our local school districts, and just about every school district in the 9-county region has off that day, Greece schools included. Now let's mention safety. All of you are now already prepared for the eclipse. I love this. I love it when people get glasses at talks I give. There's only 2 times when you should ever look at the sun. Number 1 is during totality, as we've mentioned. And the other one is while you are wearing your eclipse glasses. Any other time, you should never, ever directly look at the sun. Sunglasses do not work. How many of you have already looked through those glasses? Were you able to see anything? No. Good, that means they're working. You might occasionally be able to see the brightest of lights, on occasion. But the only other thing you'll ever be able to see is the sun. It blocks out about 99.9% of light. Sunglasses, even if you had 100 of them, it just would not be the same. And thankfully you all got them here. I know the school district has eclipse glasses that they got from the RMSC. And that makes me feel a bit better because back in 2017 there was a lot of fake eclipse glasses that were out there, and it caused a run of glasses at the RMSC in every library in the region. Lesson learned, we ordered 500,000. And we're not the only ones. Between Genesee County, Livingston County, additional school districts, the universities, the hospitals, that covers an additional good couple 100,000, where my rough estimate is that we have somewhere around 750,000 pairs of eclipse glasses in our 9-county region. I think we're pretty prepared this time. Now, this isn't the only way to view the eclipse. Have people here ever made a pinhole viewer or a pinhole projector? Couple hands, usually out of cardboard boxes. I think the cereal box is the most common method. That's not the only way to do it. In fact, you have pinhole projectors in your kitchen right now. I recommend colanders or strainers. The metal ones work better than the plastic ones, but it should still do in a pinch. The trick is, do not hold it up to the sun and look through it. You need to hold it down and look at the projection underneath. I actually recommend having a piece of white paper underneath it to give you a better picture. And it will look something like this, when you can see the partial phases of the eclipse right onto that piece of paper. Now this can also be done by interlocking your hands and looking down at the shadows, using slotted spoons. I've seen people use pegboard, even hole punches and index cards. And yes, there are people out there who have done this with saltines and Ritz crackers. As long as it has a small hole in it, you can achieve this. We actually had fun with this at the RMSC during the partial eclipse. The nice thing about it is you have a nice little snack afterwards. If you are still looking for classes, you can find them throughout the region. We still have plenty at the RMSC. You can find them at your libraries, through stores, rec centers. They're all over the place. Here are those other methods. So a slotted spoon, another colander, and even your hands. If you have access to a 3D printer, you can even do one in the shape of New York State. This was created by the New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Office. Had I realized you all had glasses, I would have removed this slide. And yet again, please do not use sunglasses. I repeat that again and again and again. If you are planning on having people over for the eclipse, couple quick tips. I'm not going to go into all of these. The main ones I recommend is turning off your automatic lights. They will turn on. If you can turn them off, please do. If not, well, call it a science experiment. Plan for backup weather. We know it's Rochester. If you are looking for music, there's a ton of it out of it. There's just so much out there. Yes, Total Eclipse of the Heart. There's also Here Comes the Sun, which I hear also on a daily basis. And I want to say Pink Floyd's Eclipse. The main thing I want you to do is have a dedicated timekeeper at your location. Someone to tell you when you can take your eclipse glasses off and look up at the eclipse, and when to put them back on. Having one person just even say, hey, this is what we need to do, is a good idea. You can even give yourself a couple seconds buffer. There are apps out there that will do this for you, but I like having an individual be the one to tell you. And then at the end of the day, I want you to think about who you want to experience the eclipse with and where you want to experience it. I highly recommend being with family and friends and loved ones. Being with the people you care about, because you will always remember the people you experienced the eclipse with, and you will always remember where you were. I personally am going to be at the RMSC, yes, but I'm going to be standing right next to my wife and holding my 2-year-old daughter. And I'm always going to have that moment with them. Speaking of the event, I do want to do that quick plug. Hey, yes, we are doing a massive festival. We have different speakers, different exhibitors. There's even some big news to be announced very, very soon, which I wish I could share here, about who will be coming the day of.
Who is that going to be?
Yeah, very good. But one thing we can announce, we just announced this past week, I believe for the first time, we are going to have a shuttle between all of the museums in downtown Rochester. Completely free shuttle that hits the Strong Museum, the Rochester Museum Science Center, the Memorial Art Gallery, and the George Eastman Museum, along with 2 additional garages because we need somewhere to put everywhere. And then on the day of the eclipse, we're even adding in another event at the public market within the city. Roarbox and Laughing Gull Chocolate are doing a big event there that's very family friendly, and they're doing a sensory safe one as well. So we just announced that earlier this week. And of course, a quick shout out to our sponsors. But we're not the only event in town. Far from it. In fact, there is a great event being done at Parrington through the Rec Center. The Red Wings just announced that they're going to become the Rochester Moon Rocks. I love that. We have been working with them on this announcement and even got their general manager in a spacesuit at the museum. You'll find a lot of our libraries celebrating, a lot of our parks. Monroe County just released the amount of the names of all the parks that they'll be having special activities at. You can really find something for everyone and anyone. I have seen a 5K in Mendon that's going to take place right as Totality ends. I have seen a blind dating event taking place for the eclipse. Cute concept. I think one of my personal favorites is a euchre tournament taking place the day of the eclipse. And I was like, this has to be the most Western New York thing I have heard. You can also find events really all over. I need to update this map because even more events has been added since last time I took the screenshot. There's also art being developed around the eclipse. The RPO will be doing a concert at the Blue Cross Arena the night before. They have a whole piece composed just for the eclipse. Cochran's Road Middle School did a whole musical around it. Genesee County, I have to say, they leaned in. They played with Jenna See the Eclipse and went all out. They did a children's book to actually raise funds for a lot of local farms and farm animals. And it's a really cute kids book. All of their eclipse classes are cow print. They really did an incredible job. And there's comedy, there's music, there's dance. Every possible form of music and performance is being done around the eclipse. We also have artwork. This was artwork developed by Tyler Nordgren. He's an artist and astronomer out of Ithaca. Not only does he do eclipse posters, but he does state posters, state park posters. He does parks. He does the national parks. He's written books on the eclipse. Fantastic artist. Not only did he do one for Rochester, but he did one for the Erie Canal, for the Finger Lakes for Wayne County. He even has a New York State poster now that covers from Niagara Falls through the Adirondacks. We have a lot of his artwork on display at the museum, and I believe he's giving a talk this Friday there as well. Now, if you are looking for more information, I do recommend visiting RochesterEclipse2024.org. I'm trying to keep up with adding more and more content to the site with videos, with resources. This is where you can find a map of every place that has eclipse classes, or at least every place that has submitted them. You can find activities to replicate at home. We will have some of the live streams done by NASA and the Weather Channel, and almost every news station posted, hopefully on the day of the eclipse. Those are the people who can get the big name scientists to come out and speak. But we are just adding more and more resources to it every day. And I also have to point out, I am not the only person working on this in Rochester. We have a massive task force. It's led by the RMSC, the Genesee Transportation Council, Visit Rochester, and Deb Ross from Kids Out and About. That's that core group, and then we have just brought in so many organizations representing every corner of Rochester. We've had over 700 stakeholder members attend meetings in the last 3 years. Technically longer if you want to go as far back to our 2019 meetings. So with that, there are plenty of ways to stay informed. You can follow us online. And from here, I just wanted to open it up for any questions you may have.
Can you use these for your cameras, or do you have to use a different type of device?
You can use these, the Eclipse glasses over your camera.
On the phone, like?
On the phone, and I wish I had included the slide. About a week or so ago, there was a massive sunspot, a cooler area on the sun. And we took one of our cameras, one of our phones, taped the glasses to it, and took a photo. I actually might even be able to bring up that photo fairly quickly if anyone is interested. But yes, you can do it that way. If you have a regular size camera, I recommend using a bigger filter.
What density filter?
It needs to follow the ISO requirement to make sure that it is up to snuff. I recommend checking out a lot of the photography stores for Eclipse filters, or people who produce telescopes and binoculars, and they have them as well. Other questions?
Could you go over briefly again? I reached where I'm going to be that day. When do I put my glasses on? Approximately what time?
At 2:07. Anytime you're looking up at the sun. Oh, I can't view here because we're within that network. Never mind, I can't pull up that photo. Not a bad thing. Basically, let me pull up that slide. I have to go back a little bit. There we are. So this is your exact times. So only during 3:20 to 3:23 and 48 seconds can you remove those glasses. Any other time you're looking directly at the sun, you should be wearing them. I don't recommend walking around with the glasses on, and I highly, highly recommend not wearing them while driving. I have been asked that.
So what you're saying, Dan, is put the glasses on where we are at around 2:07.
If you're looking.
If you're looking at the sun.
Okay, only if you're looking at the sun.
Yep.
And then take them off at around 3:20.
Yep.
Can you wear them over your glasses?
You can wear them over your glasses. I do this as well. There is a great activity out there where you can, if you have young ones with you, NASA has developed this activity where you take a paper plate, you cut a couple holes where the eyes will be, and 2 slots so that you can put your eclipse glasses through them. And that way you can just kind of plop the glasses on top of a paper plate and then hold up that paper plate. If anyone is curious, I will share the photo of my daughter doing this. We made hers 2 weeks ago.
Will the sun actually affect the camera?
Yes, except during totality. It could damage your cameras. I have known people to sacrifice cameras. Not too many, but I recommend you get a filter. I also have to say, if this is your first total solar eclipse, a lot of people are going to be taking photos. There's astrophotographers who love doing that. Enjoy the eclipse.
Gotta know, where is the best place around Greece to watch this happen?
Where's the best place? Anywhere.
Okay.
I'm often asked this question, what's the best place in the greater Rochester region even? And as long as you're in that path of totality, you're perfect. You're absolutely great. As long as you're not standing in front of a brick wall or directly in front of a tree. Early April, I don't expect too many leaves to be up. But still, you want to think about that now. I think I saw a question in the back. I could be mistaken. Yes?
The birdhouse on Monroe Avenue has the camera filters.
Yes, the birdhouse on Monroe does have the camera filters. I will also point out I will be sticking around a few minutes afterwards if anyone has any additional questions as well. Yep.
What we did was we went outside and looked where the sun is right now, because in just a few weeks you'll be able to tell, like the day before, go out and find out where the sun is, so you know the best place to stand.
Yeah, in that, honestly, the 2 weeks before and the 2 weeks after, which is very scary to think we're just about there, if you go outside at 3:20 p.m., you'll get a really good idea where the sun should be.
Good tip.
We actually did that the last 3 years. We hopped around Rochester during those 2 weeks before and afterwards, and we were scouting the region out. Seeing if any buildings would be in the way. There was 2 or 3 of us running around the museum grounds on April 8th, 2023, this past year, just trying to see if there was any bad view. There's like maybe 1 or 2 if you're right up against some evergreens, and that's about it. With that, thank you all so much for coming out tonight.
You gotta watch your camera because it can burn out the sensor.
Yeah, that's what.
If you point.
Upcoming second Tuesdays of the month programs from the Greece Historical Society. Times, dates, and locations for the following programs are subject to change. Please check our Facebook page for updated information. Want to learn more from the Greece Historical Society and Museum? Then click that subscribe button. Hit that bell icon to get notified when there's new content coming from the Greece Historical Society. You can visit us on the web at GreeceHistoricalSociety.org. You can find us on Facebook at Greece Historical Society. And you can stop in at the Greece Historical Society at 595 Long Pond Road.